The most controversial interpreters of the faith during the 1960s was the Nation of Islam. They offered a brand of Islam tailored to the oppressed black masses. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad was their leader.
I'm your blood and your flesh. White people are not your brother. They're not your blood and your flesh.
The nation tapped into black anger and disillusionment. Some members of the Nation of Islam believed Elijah Muhammad was a prophet. Some believed the messenger of God, and some believed him to be God in the flesh.
I represent to you not a prophet, yes, sir, but I represent to you God in person. Yes, sir. That's right.
They believed not in black equality, but black superiority. The Nation of Islam seemed to be the spiritual expression of the Black Power movement.
They had millions of dollars of real estate. They had their own bank. They had the newspaper, Muhammad Speaks, with the largest circulation of any black newspaper in America. Farmlands, you know, many, many millions of dollars of assets.
The Nation of Islam had emerged from the black working-class neighborhoods of Detroit during the 1930s. Its founder, W.D. Farad, a pale-skinned man, invented a theology in which whites were the devils and blacks the creators of the universe.
He talked about white people as the inverse of black people, who he presented as kind of divine group of people. And the white people, according to W.D. Farad, were involved in devilish kinds of behavior in terms of racism and economic inequities, which they had perpetrated on the black community.
Salam alaikum. In the name of Allah, the most merciful, to whom all holy praises is due.
Elijah Muhammad used traditional greetings, but he did not teach from Islam's holy book, the Quran. Instead, he used the Bible.
The Bible was used specifically because we, as black people, had never seen the Holy Quran. We'd never heard of it. We were really in the Bible. So his thorough knowledge of the Bible was tremendous. There's much good in the Bible, though it was referred to as a poison book by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. But penicillin, too, is poison. But it will help you if it's administered by a good doctor.
And most of those people in the Nation of Islam, most of those people were Baptists. They come up in the Baptist church, and they were God-fearing people. They were people with good, strong moral base, but they couldn't reconcile those Christian teachings with what they experienced in their daily lives.
I didn't dislike Mr. Farad. I loved him. I didn't dislike my father. I loved my father. I loved him and love him more now. I didn't dislike the Nation of Islam. I didn't dislike their disciplines, their spirit, their brotherhood. I loved it.
Wallace Muhammad, the seventh child of Elijah Muhammad, was the prophesied heir to his father's nation within a nation. In public, Elijah Muhammad stood first. Most people then saw national spokesman Malcolm X. Wallace Muhammad was groomed for leadership in the background.
I don't think any child was raised from infancy by his parent to believe that his father was so high up in the world of mankind that he was speaking directly with God or got his message directly from God. I don't think any child would want to see that destroyed or want to get away from that. You're very special when your father's that special.
Elijah Muhammad's teachings promised that discipline would free the black man from the prison of race. The nation trained an elite corps of men to protect itself and ensure internal structure. Called the Fruit of Islam, their training began as young boys.
Brother David 2X, Camden, New Jersey.
What about you, sir?
Amanda X from New York.
From New York City? All right. You got some brothers from Camden and brothers from number 7. How do you feel today, brother?
Fine.
Isn't it a blessed thing to come see the Honorable Wallace Muhammad?
Yes, sir.
What about you, brother? How do you feel about the Honorable Wallace
Honorable
Muhammad?
Wallace Muhammad is trying to teach all our original people they are in bad shape.
Yeah. Go ahead, brother.
Honorable Wallace Muhammad trying to wake them up.
You think he'll do it?
Yes, sir.
He's the only man with a program, right?
Yes, sir.
Good enough.
One of my jobs was to organize the junior fruit. And so I'd get the fellas in a line, little boys, I mean from 5, 6 years old up until, you know, maybe 15 years old, because at 16 you became a senior fruit. And we'd march down the road and start peeling off into people's homes. And so the last person would go in front of the first person and so on and so forth until we canvassed the whole neighborhood.
Nation members preached their brand of Islam anywhere black people gathered, even churches. They called it fishing for the dead.
We were taught that we had to go out and bring in the dead, and people were not alive or dead to the knowledge of themselves. And we would say to them that those basic teachings we had at that time, the white man is the devil, he's the cause of all your problems, and he loves it when he sees you drinking this alcohol and taking this dope, and we've got a life-giving message for you that you need to hear, and come with us and transform or change your life.
Assalamu alaikum.
As a matter of fact, we refer to our brothers and sisters as lost founds until they heard the message. And then after they heard the message, they would have been found. So there was always the push, the initiative to get people to read the newspaper, to read the articles and books, come to the mosque, any place that you could, to get our people first to hear the message of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad.
The disciplines and intensity of conversion into the Nation of Islam made the larger black community view them with alarm and suspicion.
My family, in general, at first was really not very accepting of me becoming a Muslim. I used to have to take my clothes from home, go to a friend's house, get dressed and changed, and go to the temple it was then, and then perform there, whatever I was going to do, then go back to her house and change clothes, and then go home, because my stepmother would have totally died if I had worn, you know, a long dress and covered my head coming in her house, because what would the neighbors say?
Many black people were totally intimidated by the Nation of Islam. I mean, you got a bunch of brothers, some brothers who have been seen maybe 2-3 months ago looking kind of junkified, looking kind of run down, looking like they were going to bust into your crib and take your TV. Now, all of a sudden, the same brother's walking around with a bow tie on, a white shirt and a suit. His hair's combed neat, and he's got the Mohammed Speaks paper where he's got a bean pie in his hand. He's trying to sell you. And he's just like, ain't you the same guy that climbed into my aunt's house and tried to steal her TV? Oh, you went to prison and you got into the Nation of Islam. Oh, you changed. Oh, so it was deep, but because they were so regimentated and because they were so precise and direct and never wavering about what they were about, they were really an intimidation to quite a number of black people.
There was a time when we used to drool in the mouth over white people.
The Nation of Islam advocated racial separatism and rejected nonviolent resistance. The nation's most popular spokesman was Malcolm X, one of many who converted to the nation while in prison.
They call Mr. Muhammad a black supremacist because he teaches you and me not only that we're as good as the white man, but better than the white man. You find that old pale thing laying out in the sun, trying to get to look like you. That old pale thing.
Civil rights leaders called this group of Muslims thugs and urged the FBI to investigate. The leading civil rights organization denounced the nation's separatist philosophy.
Preaching of racial hatred and racial advantage and the bigotry involved is a bad thing, whether it's colored or white. Now, for years, the NAACP has been opposed to white extremists preaching hatred of Negro people, and we are equally opposed to Negro extremists preaching against white people simply for the sake of whiteness.
Meanwhile, the Nation of Islam pursued the hearts and minds of black America.
As many of us today walking around praying and hoping that the white man will soften up. There's nothing in him to soften up. He was created evil.
I have to be very honest. I did not agree with the civil rights movement. I did not feel that turning the other cheek was what we needed. I thought it left our people vulnerable, particularly our women. They turned fire hoses and dogs on our people. It brought tears to my eyes when I saw those women being turned upside down with those fire hoses. And we in the Nation of Islam just did not feel that was appropriate.
See, it's important for us to understand that the Nation of Islam was the only religious and community of black people who were unashamed of being black. Now, with that proclamation being so strong, and with separatism as a dimension of that proclamation, where black people don't have to be with white people in order to be full human beings, that hit the civil rights movement and the mainstream black church movement really hard, and it shocked us. Because the dominant ethos in the 50s and the early 60s, the first half of it anyway, the dominant ethos was integration, which means assimilating and going into white institutions, even white churches and etc., white schools, white everything. Now, and here was Malcolm in the Nation of Islam saying no to that. Well, that was frightening to us, because deep down we knew they were telling the truth. But we didn't want to hear that truth.
You say we are on the road now to a better world.
Although they would never become converts, many black people outside of the Nation of Islam secretly admired its outspokenness and openly applauded their do-for-self economic creed.
There was a sense of loyalty. Also, I remember, and we often say it now, those of us who were in the nation, the loyalty in terms of do for your brother what you would do for yourself or sister. We never heard sister as much as we heard brother. But all of that, you know, the nation building, the coming together, the doing for self, all of those were very attractive to me. And in retrospect, were very liberating, because I began to believe that I could do, we could do. We could do, that was more important, we could do.
I suspected that Religion Nation of Islam style wanted to assist us and prod us along. Go to your destiny. Hurry up. Go to your destiny. Your destiny where you see your true human value better and you'll respect yourself more. I saw the Nation of Islam as that influence, prodding us on and whispering to us, you don't have it yet quite right.
As an adolescent, Wallace Muhammad had begun a spiritual journey that would continue for the rest of his life.
When I was about 13 years old, I was left at home. And this is a wood frame house, and when everybody gets out of it, nothing happens, it starts talking, you know. The floors are squeaking and strange noises, and I'm scared. So I held my hands the way we hold them when we would pray, like this. We call it prayer, but really it's dua. It means calling on God for something, for some help, some assistance. So I held my hands like this, and I hesitated. I didn't speak right away. I hesitated like this. I'm holding my hand like this. Then I said, "Oh, Allah, if I'm not seeing you correctly, will you please help me see you correctly?" And what was bothering me wasn't that I disliked anything, but the logic was bothering me. I'm told that white people are devils. I guess from the time I took the first drink of milk, I've told that white people are devils, you know. And the man I'm seeing his picture, I'm seeing the picture of the teacher who taught my father and gave my father his mission. His name is Farad. Our Savior, we called him, our Savior. I'm not comfortable with that picture because I was told the white man's the devil.
By the time he was 25, Wallace Muhammad had become minister of Temple Number 11 in Philadelphia and a lieutenant in the Fruit of Islam. He was a friend of Malcolm X, but while Malcolm X remained a true believer in Elijah Muhammad, Wallace Muhammad harbored doubts about the message and the messenger.
I was raised to believe in the teachings of my father and identify my religion as Islam. But as I grew older, as I got braver, I guess, to face things that were not settling with me too well, ideas about the origin of man and God, it took me from the Nation of Islam's teachings, and I was changing the way I thought and the way I perceived reality.
As a young minister, Wallace Muhammad brought his growing knowledge of Orthodox Islam to the temple in Philadelphia.
He was teaching his people, the membership of Philadelphia, more knowledge of Prophet Muhammad, more knowledge of the Holy Quran, its value, de-emphasizing his father's role subtly. He didn't emphasize his father as Prophet Muhammad. He taught them about the late Prophet Muhammad, and he taught Arabic. He showed them how to pray. And so, therefore, his temple was uniquely advanced.
He was just persistent in unraveling the mysteries of Farad's teachings and searching for something to hold on other than those questions that kept popping up in his mind, I guess, regarding the concept of God in the Nation of Islam.
Elijah Muhammad prohibited all members of the Nation of Islam from serving in the U.S. military, which he called the white man's army. Wallace Muhammad was charged with draft evasion and in 1961 began serving a 3-year prison sentence.
I was in Sandstone Federal Correctional Institution, free, away from family, away from the Temple of Islam, demands on my time. I'm free.
Freed from the contradictions of the nation's faith, Wallace Muhammad was left alone to face himself.
Certain ideas that would come under theology had become so unattractive to me, I had to throw it out. You have a nice garment, you really like this garment, and it's a strong sentimental attachment to it, you know? But it's getting holes, got holes. Everybody's seeing the whole. So you're not going out with that. She said, I'm not going out anymore with this song. I have to throw this away. As much as I like it, I have to throw it away. And the most difficult thing was to say the Honorable Elijah Muhammad is not the messenger of God or the messenger of Allah. That was very difficult. But I had to say that. Now, I'm not only having difficulty saying my father is no more this high figure here in religion and bringing him down to a low level with preachers and reformers rather than as a messenger of God. But I'm having difficulty, too, rejecting what they told me about myself, that you were chosen before you were born. So now that's a high place for me, too, that I'm chosen before I was born, and I'm supposed to be one of three doing this great work. God in the person or in the flesh, Elijah Muhammad, the messenger of God, and me.
The spiritual and the political are intimately related. But the spiritual is the foundation for everything. So I know who I am because of my spiritual connection with a power much greater than myself. Now that's the spiritual side. Now when you experience that spiritual power and affirmation, it pushes you to bring the political in harmony with the spiritual knowledge that you have of yourself.
For black Christians and others who believed in freedom faith, the 1963 March on Washington became the very expression of spiritual power and political affirmation. That same year, Wallace Muhammad was released from prison. He began to share his spiritual awakening, a path that would lead him into direct conflict with his father.
Listening to Uncle Wallace's just basic things, you know, how can a man be God? God created the heavens and the earth and created the people and everything. How can we pray to a human being? Those kind of things. I mean, they're so basic, so fundamental, but I mean, they were eye-opening things to me.
I knew that I had to somewhat deprogram myself and deorientate myself. And how I began to start to do that was I just immersed myself into Islamic information. And by me submerging myself into study, it began to contrast the lack of information that I had about what Islam was not.
The Nation of Islam was under siege. The mainstream media portrayed them as fanatics. The FBI had targeted them for investigation. That only made their faith in Elijah Muhammad stronger. But when Muhammad was charged with fathering 7 children out of wedlock, the community of believers was shaken.
This is the black man we have waited for.
Louis X, minister of Temple Number 9 in Boston, was among Elijah Muhammad's strongest defenders.
Our prayers have been answered in the personage of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. His name, all praises due to Allah.
Although Wallace Muhammad stood beside his father, reports of his heresy led to his being excommunicated several times.
The first time that I was excommunicated or put out of the Nation of Islam, what brought that about was reports to my father, the leader of the Nation of Islam, Elijah Muhammad, that I was saying that Mr. Farad is not God.
We felt that what we believed, what we had embraced, was right universally. And we felt that what they believed, and what we formerly believed, was wrong, and that it was destined to go down or to fade or to go away at some point. That truth is forever.
Malcolm X, the man who had been like a son to Elijah Muhammad, and Wallace, the man who was his son, left the nation. They moved in different directions towards Orthodox Islam. They were labeled traitors.
We received some threats from the Chicago staff here, and we were told that there were members of the New York mosque who were also planning to come to Chicago and do us bodily harm. One time I was coming home, too, and it was about 12 o'clock. And I'm getting ready to cross the street, and I noticed a suspicious-looking car, and I could see two figures on the front seat, and the lights are out on the car. And I'm thinking that they are members of the Fruit of Islam. I'm thinking that, I believe that. When I got out about in the middle of the street, they put the bright lights on, the headlights on, high beams on, gun in the motor, coming toward me. And my mind told me, just keep your same pace, don't change. When he got close to me, he swerved around me to miss me, and when I looked to see the lights, I was trying to catch the license plate. They had turned the lights out. And they turned the corner, immediately turned the corner.
In February 1965, Malcolm X was assassinated in Harlem. Within days, Malcolm X's followers burned the nation's Temple No. 7 in New York. As factions arose in the nation, the community Elijah Muhammad had worked so hard to build seemed threatened from within and without.
I heard on the radio that Malcolm had been killed, murdered. Without thinking, I told my wife, I said, I have to call Daddy. He came to the phone. He said, Assalamu alaikum, Wallace. I said, Walaikum assalam, Daddy. I said, tomorrow is Savior's Day. I said, I want to be on the platform with you tomorrow at your Savior's Day meeting. He said, that's good, son. I said, well, you know what that means? I said, yes, sir. He said, you'll have to come before the people and tell them you were wrong. I said, yes, sir. He hung up.
I'm going to bring before you the messenger of Allah's son, Brother Wallace D. Muhammad, who wants to make a confession. Brother Wallace D.
And I said to them, Assalamu alaikum. They returned the greetings to me, very warm and powerful return of the greetings to me. Spirit of Savior's Day. Brothers and sisters, I'm thankful to be present here today. I regret my mistake, and I pray Allah that my Father accept me, and I pray as is necessary that you also accept me and permit me back in your midst as a brother. Assalamu alaikum. Well, the Nation of Islam is precious to us as a means of getting us, moving us from the old Negro or the old black man to the new black man. So to save the child for the future was what I had on my mind. And to defeat whatever the enemies of the Nation of Islam were doing to divide the leadership and disillusion the following. That's all I was responding to. I was responding to the Nation of Islam at risk. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad needs help in this serious time. That's what I was responding to.
My reaction to Wallace going back was a little disappointing at that time, but that was an emotional response. I think through my rationality and reason, I realized that, he owed more. He had obligations to his family. He had obligations to his father. He has obligations to the people that were followed by his father.
In 1975, Elijah Muhammad died. He was 77. He had publicly refused to name a successor. Although many within the leadership sought the position, the inner circle knew that Muhammad favored his son, Wallace.
And I remember that at the moment it was announced Wallace was going to be the successor to his father and the leader, the people in the auditorium just went berserk, berserk in a mannerly way, if you will. But I mean, everybody was just joyous. It was exciting.
W.D. Farad's prophecy of Wallace Muhammad's leadership had been fulfilled. But Wallace Muhammad had his own agenda. Almost immediately, he began moving the community towards Orthodox Islam.
How I brought about the change or transformation, it was finding first something from those people that they respected, those high figures that they respected, Mr. Farad and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. I got whatever they had given me to do the job with. I took that first. And then I added to that. I built upon that. And that's how it was done. I didn't come to them and telling them that this is a lie. No, that wouldn't work. They'd throw me out of here. And I wouldn't blame them.
He established that the basis for the Muslim life of this community was the Quran, the revealed word of God, and that we stand on that, we follow that, and that the Sunnah, the life example of Prophet Muhammad, the prayers and the peace be upon the Prophet, is our example.
Wallace Muhammad renamed himself Warith Deem Mohammed, inheritor of the faith. He took the title of Imam. He streamlined the many businesses owned by the nation, and he abolished the fruit of Islam. Most disturbingly to the old guard, he extended membership to white people.
It was like going from heaven to hell in one night. My whole world was turned upside down. As a student of the University of Islam, we didn't have the best books. We didn't have the best facilities. But the spirit was indescribable. When that dissolved as a result of the death of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the advent of his son, it threw my world into trouble. And it finally came to me that those disciplines that I was a part of, it was what was supporting me. So I up and joined the Marine Corps.
I remained in the Nation of Islam when Wallace D. Muhammad took over initially. I was there for about a year. And initially I thought that the changes that he was going to bring would be beneficial. As I've said before, we're not perfect, and we're always striving to improve. But there was one night in particular that Imam Wallace Muhammad said that his father was not divine, that he did not, in fact, believe that his father was the messenger of God. I could not take that. That would be going against what I believed.
By 1976, the original Nation of Islam ceased to exist. 2 years later, Minister Louis Farrakhan resurrected it. Farrakhan still believed in the philosophy of the nation and the divinity of Elijah Muhammad.
We don't believe that Elijah Muhammad died. We don't believe that. Those of us who really believe in him, we believe that he is away from us, and we do believe that he's going to return to us. The Nation of Islam, under the leadership of Minister Louis Farrakhan, is about first loving one another, loving each other, and then loving everybody else.
Well, the reason that I didn't follow Minister Farrakhan was because I was becoming familiar with al-Islam as it was being taught to me by W.D. Muhammad. And what Minister Farrakhan was bringing, I had already experienced that. And I had already been hurt by it.
Between 1975 and 2001, Wallace Muhammad brought 2 million African Americans into Islam. He immersed his community in traditional practices. They make the pilgrimage to Mecca, called Hajj, and pray 5 times a day.
I don't really think I thought very much about the man until he said 3 words that opened the door for me. And those 3 words were, man is mind. And a door opened for me that has never closed. Man is mind means that that this is where you are. This is not what matters. It's what's here and what's here, in the heart and in the mind.
Imam W.D. Muhammad named his organization the Muslim American Society. It connects African American Muslims with Islamic communities worldwide. Today, Islam is one of the fastest growing religions among African Americans.
The Muslim I am today is one who is firm in the belief, strong in my practice, in the Nation of Islam, I would barely even touch the Quran. Today, by the grace of Allah, His mercy, His blessing, I not only touch it, I am in it.